As that way.
The Epignostic Heart. I'm honest enough to softly say, I don't yet know the final way. No need for answers, neat and clear. I walk with questions drawing near.
All right, hey guys, I got Raquel with me here, and you know that we're creative individuals. You know that language is powerful, and Raquel has a powerful new word, epignostic, that she'd like to share with you guys, and I'd like to share with you guys, because it could lead to all sorts of fruits. That's a seed that we're putting out there that can yield fruits later on. Raquel, thanks so much for being on. Can you please tell us about epignostic and what the journey was towards discovering this term?
Yeah, and thanks for having me. I'm really excited about having this conversation. I think the way that it started for me is I am part of 12-step community, and I've been part of 12-step community for many, many years. And we are encouraged to find a power greater than ourselves, or we're encouraged to seek out a relationship with God. So our book uses the word God, and our book uses the word higher power. So lots of times through the steps, people have these new spiritual experiences, but they're not entirely clear on what a higher power looks like or what God looks like. So some people just resort to saying, I'm agnostic. And the reason why they say agnostic is because they don't believe they can prove the existence to God. They don't want to have that conversation. So they just say, I have no knowledge. When in reality, they might have a little bit of knowledge, but they don't want to share that because they don't want to get into the argument or trying to define or trying to convince somebody what that is. So they just resort to saying, I'm agnostic. And then we have that other word, Gnostic, which means, special knowledge or all knowledge. And most people don't have that either. So I was kind of doing some research and I was kind of going, well, I have a little bit more than no knowledge, and my friends have a little bit more than no knowledge. They have these spiritual experiences, these special personal experiences that have encouraged them to think to themselves, maybe there is a God, or maybe there is a higher power, or maybe I even believe in that divinity and I don't really know why. So they're past no knowledge. They've got a fuller knowledge, which is what epi is, but they're not fully there, convinced and able to share this divine knowledge that they would have. Curious enough to gently seek the truth unknown, the path unique. Each step I take, a door swings wide to wonders vast where doubts reside. So I thought the word epignostic was really good because it's a safe place to stand in my knowledge with the divine.
That's awesome. So it's like, there's something, there's like a power, just a synchronicity, there's a guidance, there's almost like an inner illumination, but you're not quite sure what that is. You don't want to put a face or a name to it. You don't want to conclusively say much about it. So epignostic could be a bit of a bridge from atheism towards either just a new way of being in the world, a way of being in the world that there's something behind all of this. So it's kind of like Paul says that everyone knows because of creation, the way the creation has been set up, that there's something there. And so maybe that's epignostic. And how do you think that it could serve like the 12-step communities and the mental health communities? How do you think it could help?
Well, first of all, I think there's a difference in the word because when you talk about Paul, it's not that assurity that a Christian has. So there's no assurance, but it's not the spirituality that perhaps somebody who likes to meditate or walk in nature and gives credit to the universe. It's different than that too. Epignostic is a person who has had a specific spiritual experience that leads them to believe that there is a God, that there is a greatest power or a higher power, or that there is the divine. They just can't stop and pause and define that. I think that epignostic also, it starts a conversation. If I say to you, You ask me, somehow we start telling stories about our mental health and our experiences. And I say, I really, based on my experience in psychosis or in mania, I'm epignostic. I've had these experiences. I know there's a God, but I can't fully define what that is. And if I never fully know, if answers hide or never show, that's okay. I'm at peace within, for faith begins where doubts have been. I'm honest enough to admit that I don't know. I'm curious enough to ask for more, but I'm totally okay if I never know. That's the place that we rest. That's the common ground. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that really does. So it's like we're never going to be able to fathom what this God is anyway. But you know that there's something there. Like, so tying it into some stories, or you said maybe within psychosis, what are some experiences people could have, or maybe that you've had, that can show there's something there?
I think I have two really good stories that I can only account to some sort of divine intervention. And one is kind of interesting. I was probably about 18 years old, and we were all going down to the beach, and all my friends were going to do LSD. And so I decided that I was going to go down and do LSD with them. So we all went down to the ocean and down to the beach, and they're passing out the little tabs or the little candies or whatever. And it got to me, and I had this thought that just was overpowering, just pushed out all the other thoughts in my mind. And the thought said, go ahead, do it. You'll never come back. And I was like, it was that strong that I was like, no, thank you. You know, I mean, it
Wow.
wasn't a
Wow.
parent, it wasn't a human guidance. It was just that was do it and you'll never come back. And what's interesting about that is that I am bipolar, and my first manic experience wasn't until I was about 38 years old. But maybe that LSD would have sent me into my first psychosis
Mm.
at 18 instead of 35, or maybe my brain would have never come back. I don't know. I look at the experience, and there's a lot of what ifs based on the latter part of my life. So, and I can't explain that, what that was or specifically what it is, but I know that it's something that I would define as God. Something intervened on my behalf. And then I had another thing happen that was the same exact thing. I was a young mother, and my daughter was about 2 years old. And I was standing talking to a friend of mine in the driveway, and my daughter was toddling around. And I was just talking to her. And all of a sudden, the girl looks at me and she goes, I'm really glad that you're not one of those mothers that micromanages your kids. And all of a sudden, the word pool, just pool, came into my mind. I go running into their backyard, and my daughter is at the bottom of the pool.
What?
So I jump in, I get her out, just like one breath away from drowning.
No way.
And it was like that isn't just it's those kind of situations where I'm not entirely what that was. I know
Yeah.
that it was divine intervention. I know it was much bigger than me, and it's a presence that I would call God, because both those situations were looking out for me.
Yeah. Oh, that's awesome. Yeah, I never heard that story. That's so powerful and such validation that there's something more going on. So the way that they teach us in science textbooks, there's no way you could have known that. There's no way you could have known that your daughter was in the pool. And now we're getting scientific validation that LSD can trigger psychosis. It can cause the onset of schizophrenia. I actually personally believe if I ever had have taken LSD, I never would have come out of Alice's rabbit hole. So I think you're onto something there too. So then what is the progression within your own life, or what is the typical progression when that happens to someone? Does it change your whole worldview? Do you have to go seek it? What's it been like within your own life?
I think that the term epignosis could really help if it caught on. So I was talking to somebody this morning, and they were saying, well, how or when do you tell your story about these experiences that you've had? And I think you have to be really careful to make sure that you're with people who will honor your story, especially in recovery and as a mental health consumer, that we're with the right people that are going to respect and honor our experience. I think trying to explain an intense moment can often dilute it. So I think we should hold on to our experiences until we know that somebody has had a similar experience or that they have been around people with similar experiences, places where our stories will be honored and the response will be, wow, that is really cool. You know, that's really exciting. I'm so glad that that happened to you, or that's amazing. You want to hear what happened to me? You know what I mean? It's like so many things to find that common ground that we all stand on. I think what is more it's hard to tell a story that's something that really means a lot to you. Like I've had dreams where I have experienced very real moments, and I enjoy telling those stories to people who are neurodiverse, people who have had experiences that are unique and special because my stories aren't discounted with that was just a dream. You know, it
Yeah.
was like if I'm telling somebody that really understands, if another person is identifying as epignostic, then I know that they've had experiences too, and that they're open to exploring the concept of the divine or the concept of a higher power. And they won't feel threatened that they have to explain their beliefs. It's just the freedom. I think it's a words create conversation. If you say you're an agnostic, it's like, I don't believe in God. You can't prove that there is a God. Conversation over. If you say you're a Gnostic or a believer, it's I'm convinced. I have special knowledge. I know exactly what is what. Conversation is over. If you say I'm an epignostic, then the conversation opens.
Mm.
I've had experiences that lead me to believe that there might be a God or might be a higher power. And that frees me up to say, well, I've had some of these similar experiences too. I can't define it, I can't explain it, but I know that my daughter was at the bottom of that pool. And I know that something told me she was there.
Yeah.
So I know something's there, but I don't know what that is.
So would that have to be leaning towards divinity or even a personal God, or could it be discovery of like a mysterious law of nature, like maybe there is like telepathy? Could the belief in telepathy and psychic phenomena or hearing the voice saying you're never going to come back from that, is that different from there being a God, or does one lead to the other? So if you're epignostic, do you have to be leaning towards, actually, I think it might be some sort of a God, like maybe a personal God or even a non-personal God, but there's definitely a divinity, or could it just be psychic phenomena?
I think that it is very different in the way that I use it. People could choose to use it in different ways. But I think the psychic phenomenon or the mental telepathy or channeling or any of those things tend to be spiritual. People use the word spiritual. Epignostic is a fuller knowledge. It's a little bit more than having no knowledge. And agnostic means I don't believe in God. There's no proof that there is God. So epignostic is using the same term, and it just means a little bit more. So, yes, I would say the way that I would use it, it means that I have a little knowledge about God that I can depend on. And I'm pretty sure there's something out there and I can continue to grow and move in that direction. So yeah, I think there's spiritual and then there's epignostic. I think there's two totally different words.
Yeah, very cool. Differentiating ourselves. And you've been working in the 12-step community and as a mentor for a lot of different years. Have you found the discovery of this divine reality, or when a person becomes epignostic, what does that do to their path towards sobriety and how does it change their life in general?
I think I really, this term kind of just came up with me in the last 3 months. So, what I noticed in recovery was people that weren't sure would identify as agnostic. But I was finding that they were having these little aha moments, these little white light moments. Well, there might be, but they just weren't comfortable saying that, yes, I believe in a higher power. So I think this word will encourage people who would have identified as agnostic just because they don't want to have the conversation because they can't prove it to utilize another word that identifies them as just a little bit more along the path of accepting the presence of a power greater than themselves or just people in recovery, so I can only use on recovery, but people in recovery are encouraged when they first get into program to say a simple prayer, even if they don't believe in God. So it's kind of like they're encouraged to pray if they don't believe in God. They're encouraged to pray if they do believe in God. So let's say if you're dealing with a 12-step program for alcohol, they might be encouraged in the morning to say simply, God, please keep me sober today. And then they'd be encouraged at night to say, God, thank you for keeping me sober. And before you know it, one day at a time, one day after another, all of a sudden they wake up and they've been sober for 90 days and they've never been able to quit drinking before. That's a tiny white light, tiny aha, a tiny bit of experience that something's happening outside themselves. And I think that we have this in the mental health community too. I know that I haven't, it's been almost 2 years since I was in my last, I had my last hospital experience, kind of one day at a time. And as I focus, I kind of lean into the higher power concept and I kind of say the same prayer of keep me sober, keep me sane. It's kind of like I kind of trust that there is a power greater than myself that's looking out for my better interests and will lead me in the right direction if I just lean in that space.
Yeah, just leaning into it a little bit more. So, oh, there's something there. And then if you start to interact with that something, it almost takes on a life of its own and it provides concrete proof that there's something. You're sober for 90 days. You never would be able to pull this off in your own strength. So that's, I guess, what AA is based on. The 12th step is as a result of the spiritual awakening, we do our best to take this message to others. So in
Yeah.
following this path, and you kind of, it's part of the path to believe in the higher power, you will find that these results actually induce a spiritual awakening. So is epignostic a stage on the way to something else, or do people stay in that? Do people stay epignostic? What do you think, or have you seen that in your own journey or in the lives that you've supported and guided?
I think what I've seen without the use of the word, so the term really wasn't available, but what I've seen with people on a spiritual adventure or a spiritual
Yeah.
journey is that their belief maybe in a higher power is very small and they take what they can get. It's kind of like they take that maybe there's a God that's involved in my life, maybe, and they just sort of account that's my higher power. My higher power is something that's involved in my life. But I heard somebody in recovery, which I believe that a person outside of recovery could do too, that you can always trade up, that you
Uh,
can start with some information and then a couple years go by and you get a little bit more information and you kind of trade up and you're kind of like, all right, now this is a power greater than myself. And then you have a new experience of this power greater than yourself doing something that you had no idea it could do, but you can't take credit for it and you trade up again.
mm.
I think epignostic is that place where you're free to stay or you're free to trade up.
That's such a good way of putting it. Yeah, it's almost like you've turned on a light and you can start to see things, and there can be like a unfolding revelation of what was there all the time, but you were just missing it because that light wasn't on. You know there's something else. And then it does make me think of Paul, where he's cruising through Athens, like a really spiritual town, and he sees a statue to an unknown god. And then he says, guys, you're all really religious, and this statue to an unknown God, I'm here to reveal who that God is. And then obviously he goes on to say that it's Jesus. But even in Athens, they recognized that there was some sort of unknown force at work. And so it's cool how it's stepping into the world of a enchanted universe where and both of those experiences had your back. This benevolent presence has your back, and it's going to help you with things like sobriety and with mental health and with all sorts of other paths that we're on. So I think it's a really cool stepping stone, and even you can stay on that stone. It's a bridge from sort of atheism towards a new way of being in the world in which it's animated and alive. So thank you for bringing it to our community. Any final thoughts, or what else would you like to add here that could
I
help to benefit
think
our community?
I think the terms that I think one of the things about epignostic is I think that it is a safe place to start a conversation. I think if somebody identifies as epignostic, they're really saying that I'm going to honor your journey and you're going to honor mine. And there's a couple words, embrace, not explain.
Mm.
experience, don't label, and discover, don't define. It's just that happy place to sit and I go, I know there's something,
Yeah.
I know there's something, and I'm comfortable just sitting right in that space. It's not, I think it's so important, especially in our community, both in the recovery community and the mental health community, maybe especially in the mental health community, because we've got some pretty incredible stories.
Hmm.
I mean, and these stories all kind of point to something unknown
Exactly.
and something greater. And some of those things are good things, and some of those things are really uncomfortable things. But I think a person who's experienced a psychosis, for example, can't help but when they walk away to go, wow, there's something that I don't understand here. And I
Yeah.
think the comfort of being able to talk to another peer about this and identifying as epignostic and just knowing that that's the term to use when you want to have this conversation. Can I share with you some things that I've experienced in psychosis? So, like, what is like one of the biggest things you experience? Like, do you have any like of those my baby is in a pool thoughts or, if I take
Yeah. I have. And that was really the thing that not only made me know there was much more to psychosis, but in some ways made me a theist, made me believe in God for the first time. I'd studied this stuff, but I didn't really know if it was true until I had experiences like yours. For example, I was able to read my brother's mind verbatim, word for word. And he said, "You're reading my mind, man." And I was able to tell two of my good buddies things that happened to them when they were little kids that they'd never told me before in a lot of detail, the names and the dates and the time. How do you know that? And so I know that there was something more. And since that opened the door, I've been exploring it, I guess, without the term epignostic, trying to find other safe people to bounce these ideas off. And if it could be embraced as a term, I mean, how cool would that be? Like, it's on our Facebook profiles. Oh, this is a safe person that I could go and speak to about this. Or this is
Mhm.
like an epignostic safe community where we should be having these conversations in church, but unfortunately not. And so in finding more and more people who can have these kinds of conversations, I realized that the faith that I had was actually real, or these texts that I studied and thought were mythology. No, actually, reality is enchanted. So it was those experiences, and now thousands that I've heard from my peers in working in the field for so long that have really reanimated my world. So I think it's really powerful, and we're not going to be able to properly define it. That's one of William James's criteria for mystical experiences, is its ineffability. You can't quite put words, if you just point to it. It's what you said psychosis is. Like everyone who's had the experience, it points towards something larger. It points towards this mystery. So that can either be really debilitating, like what, everything I thought I knew is not the way it was, or it can be really exciting. Wait a minute, like there's a whole different reality behind it. So yeah, it opens the door. It turns on that light. And so I do think that it has a really valuable place in our communities. And these conversations, I think, have a valuable place because even though we can't define it, there's validation and there's something larger that emerges from the sum of our parts as we start to talk about this. It almost comes into the room where two or more are gathered, God's right there. And so when
Mhm.
we try to capture it in language and just like that's it, we can define this God. Firstly, he's not that big of a God. And secondly, and I'll end of this, is that Alan Watts tells a story about a little baby lying in her crib and a bird flies in through the window and starts flooding around. And to the baby, it's just this amazing phenomenon experience of flapping and wind and sound and light and experience. And then the mom comes in and said, "Oh, it's just a bird. It's just a bird." And from that day onwards, that whole phenomena and that whole experience is boiled down to bird. And now we just write it off as we're walking down the street, bird, 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 bird. We don't even pay attention to the phenomena. So I think in trying to capture it and own it, we do lose some of its power. So I think that's cool that you said like we don't have to necessarily define it or capture it in a box. It's a portal towards something larger.
Yeah, we want to embrace the moment without trying to dissect it. And I think that's the beautiful thing of epignostic is just the conversation begins with, I don't know. I'm okay if I don't know. It's kind of like I don't have to know everything, and I'm okay if I never know. But the point of the conversation or the point of the connection is for each person's story to be validated. And I think in doing that, then it leaves room for another story. It
Yeah.
leaves room for another experience. And I think people are willing to have different experiences based on how safe they feel.
That's it. The heart's open. And when the hearts do open, the stories flow, but also like hearts start connecting in these powerful ways. And then that's more validation. Wait, we're onto something. We're like the Holy Spirit's here. Aslan's way. So that's exactly what we're trying to foster with
Hmm.
Aslan's way. So there's people there who are agnostic, who are epignostic, who are theist, who are antagonistic. And just the openness to the space, the fact that they come shows that they're still willing to hear it. So I guess everyone would be epignostic. And in that, the stories that are shared and the encounters have a life of its own. So it's really, if we could create more of these kinds of spaces, I think the world would be a better place.
And wouldn't it be cool if we could all identify as the same thing, epignostic? And yet
Yeah,
the word itself, we could identify together. It would build unity, it would
yeah,
build community, and yet each person knowing that they're using the epignostic word is simply saying, I've had an experience of the divine, which leads me to believe that there is a divine. And that's
yeah.
all we have to say. And we could come together instead of being all these different things. We could identify under the same umbrella, which would be really unifying. That would be awesome.
Really would be. Instead of my definition needs to trump yours or my dogma needs to run. Well, there's a saying, my karma ran over your dogma. My
Hmm.
karma is going to run over your dogma. No, we could
Hmm.
all identify as we're here to explore that mystery and we're here to tap into something that's larger than the sum of our parts.
Yeah, or my job is to convince you that my spiritual experience was the right one, that you need to have my experience or you need to have my understanding. And I think if we use epignostic in the way that it's intended to be used, we know right off the bat when it's used that that one person isn't there to convince you, they're only there to share with you. I mean, it's
Yeah.
really it's a powerful place to sit, I think, where people are honoring people.
Wow, people honoring people. And let's throw that seed out there. And that's exactly what's happening as you guys are watching this video. Thanks for tuning in. And what are your thoughts? What do you think about the term epignostic and how could it benefit your life? And have you had these kinds of experiences? Feel free to leave some of them in the comments. Obviously, we're from a community of epignostics, and we love these stories and they feed into our worldview and they make it much richer. So thanks for coming here. Raquel, any final thoughts you want to leave our viewers with?
No, just the encouragement to tell a story. Think
Yeah.
about the story. Think about that moment that you never understood and give it a minute to consider and think, maybe that was something that I don't understand. Maybe that was pointing to the divine. Maybe I am epignostic. Honor your stories that you don't understand, because I think that's where we have a place for you.
Yes, and we nurture that, and you can keep it within you. That said, Mary pondered these things in her heart, and then she revealed them. So she probably didn't quite understand what was going on with her at the time. It's only in hindsight in my life that it started to make sense what those experiences were. And so if you guys have had some things that just are so out of the box that they make no sense, given some time and given the right community of open-minded peeps, there might be a beautiful sort of narrative, a story that could be woven from your experiences. So thanks again, Raquel, for bringing this to our community. Bless you.
Bye. Epignosis lights my way, not bound by rules or words to say, to embrace, to seek, to not define. The open journey is wholly mine.
Join our next gathering. For the date and time, check out aslansway.com.